there is a color that keeps showing up. Red. Deep. Impossible to ignore. You can see it in a dress. You can see it in beadwork. You can see it painted across a woman's face. Not as a wound, and not as a warning, but as a declaration of love, and a declaration of remembrance. Welcome, I'm Trisha.
And I'm Rowan.
Today we're talking about missing and murdered Indigenous women, often referred to as MMIW. More specifically, we're looking at how artists have responded to this crisis through paintings, beadwork, public art, and activism.
Because while statistics are important, numbers alone don't tell the whole story. Art gives us another way to understand what's happening and why it matters.
So let's start with some background. Across the United States and Canada, Indigenous women and girls experienced violence at disproportionately high rates. In some areas near tribal lands in the United States, Indigenous women have been killed at rates more than 10 times the national average.
And in Canada, Indigenous women make up only about 4% of the female population, but they account for a much larger percentage of missing women and female homicide victims.
These numbers represent real people: daughters, mothers, sisters, grandmothers, and friends. But for decades, many of these cases received little to no attention.
Families often struggled to get investigations taken seriously. Some cases were mishandled, while others received very little media coverage.
As a result, many Indigenous communities felt like their loved ones were being ignored.
But artists weren't ignoring them, and that's where today's discussion begins.
One of the most striking images connected to the MMIW movement is a painting called Jaylin in Red. The painting was created by artist Nyana LaFont and features Jaylin Wolfe, a 12-year-old girl from the Kettle and Stony Point First Nation in Canada.
If you've seen the image, you probably remember it. Jaylin stands in front of a gray background wearing a bright red dress and a pageant sash. She looks calm but slightly scared, and your eyes are almost immediately drawn to not only her cultural attire and headdress, but the bright red handprint covering her mouth.
The image immediately draws your attention to the color red. Within many Indigenous communities, red has become an important symbol connected to MMIW awareness. It represents remembrance, visibility, and the women who should never be forgotten. The handprint highlights how Indigenous voices have been systematically silenced through centuries of abuse and oppression.
What stands out to me about this piece is the indirect statement of how young girls have to begin fearing the action of those who hold power over them. Jaylin, in her description, describes how she fears for her own future and community. She says no one should be scared to be an Indigenous girl or woman. Please do not let this happen to me. This is heartbreaking.
I know. I see a young girl who is clearly proud of her heritage and her community, and it truly hurts me to know that she has to experience firsthand the fear of being harmed by others, especially at such a young age. It's easy to talk about the MMIW crisis as just another social justice issue, but this painting reminds viewers that behind every statistic is a real person with a family, a community, and a bright future ahead of them.
And that's something art can do really well. A number can feel distant, but a painting of a person standing in front of you does not.
This painting asks us to see Indigenous women not just as statistics, but as human beings whose lives matter.
Another example is the Red Dress Project, created by Matisse artist Jamie Black.
The project began in 2010 and involves hanging empty red dresses in public spaces. You might see them hanging from trees, displayed in gallery spaces, or suspended outside buildings.
And what's powerful is that nobody is wearing them. The dresses are empty.
That's the whole point. The empty dress represents an absence. It reminds viewers of women who are missing and women whose lives were taken.
When people encounter dozens of empty dresses hanging together, it's hard not to stop and think about what those empty spaces represent.
The dresses become a visual reminder of lives that should still be here. And because the dresses are placed in public spaces, they bring the conversation into everyday life.
You don't have to visit a museum to see the message. The message comes to you.
Another form of artistic response comes through beadwork. For many Indigenous communities, beadwork is more than just decoration. It's a cultural practice, an art form, and a way of passing knowledge between generations.
Creating beadwork takes time. a lot of time. Every bead has to be placed individually, often by hand.
That's one reason why works like Everyone the Beads are so powerful. In memorial pieces connected to MMIW awareness, individual beads can represent individual women.
When you think about that, the scale becomes overwhelming. You're looking at hundreds or even thousands of beads, and each one represents a life.
The artist has to place every single bead, one after another. It's a slow process that mirrors remembrance itself.
And as viewers, we're asked to slow down too. You can't really rush through a piece like that.
Exactly. The work transforms statistics into something physical and visible. Instead of hearing a number, you're confronted with the labor and the care that went into remembering each and every person.
Of course, there isn't just one way artists are responding to MMIW.
Not at all. Artists bring different perspectives, different styles, and different goals to their work. One example is Christy Belcourt, an OG Cree artist known for her large-scale paintings inspired by floral beadwork tradition.
Her paintings are incredibly detailed and full of color. They're often described as celebrations of Indigenous life, knowledge, and connection to the natural world.
And that's important. Not every artwork focuses directly on violence. Some artists respond by emphasizing Indigenous strength and beauty through survival.
In other words, they're saying Indigenous communities are more than the tragedies they've experienced, which is really beautiful.
Exactly. There are also murals throughout Indigenous communities and, honestly, any city throughout North America. Many feature portraits of women alongside their names.
And because these murals are often painted on large public walls, they're impossible to ignore.
The city itself becomes a memorial space. People walking by are reminded that these women existed and that they deserve to be remembered.
Coming back to a major symbol of the movement, many of you have probably seen the infamous red handprint.
The handprint is often painted across the mouth during MMIW marches, rallies, awareness events, and artwork.
The symbol represents the silencing of Indigenous women and the ways their voices have historically been ignored.
But it's also a symbol of resistance, which is meant to be seen and meant to make people ask the right questions.
And once people ask questions, they begin learning about the crisis itself.
At this point, some people might ask, why focus on art? Why not focus only on laws, policies, and activism?
The answer is that we need all of those things. Policy matters, legal reform matters, community organizing matters.
But art does something different. Art helps people feel.
A painting can make us stop. A mural can make us look. A red dress hanging in a public space can stay in our minds long after we've walked away.
Art turns statistics into stories. It reminds us that these women have human lives. They're not just data points.
And when people connect emotionally to an issue, they're often more likely to pay attention and take action.
In that sense, art isn't separate from social change. It can be part of it. We want to end with a name. Not a statistic, a name.
Savannah LaFontaine Greywind.
In 2016, Savannah LaFontaine Greywind, a 22-year-old Spirit Lake Dakota woman from North Dakota, was murdered, and her unborn child was ripped from her.
Her case gained national attention and later inspired Savannah's Act, which was signed into law in 2020 to improve how cases involving missing and murdered Indigenous people are handled.
Her name is now attached to legislation, but it's also remembered through community activism, public memorials, art, and storytelling.
People refused to let her be forgotten.
And that's what so much of this artwork is trying to do. The red dresses, the paintings, the beadwork, the murals, and the handprint.
They all carry the same message.
We see you. We remember you. And we will not let your disappearance be convenient.
Say her name.
Savannah LaFontaine Greywind.